We got to talk about the Leafs, and we touched on it at the top of the show. 7-2, not the best score line. I mean, not the end of the world either, but not very promising heading into the postseason.
I'm looking at Twitter. I'm seeing the reaction by Leaf Nation and some media members too, right? And I'm thinking, all right, there's 12 games left. Who cares at this point in the experimentation? But I do wonder, though, following a lot of sports, are we just arrogant in Toronto to think that we overreact more than other markets? It seems that we overreact, good and bad, right? Yeah. Last night being a prime example. But I do wonder whether we're any different to any other market when things don't go quite how we expect them to go.
Yeah, I mean, New York, Montreal probably fall into that same category, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's so much pressure on this team to get into the playoffs and win something. And when you make those moves at the deadline, the expectation is to win, not only in the playoffs, but start winning now.
But you bring in so many players,
yes.
It will take time to figure it out, right? Yeah. So, listen, it's not that there's 5 games left. There are, I think it's 12, isn't it?
Yeah.
Thereabouts. So, everyone just breathe and relax and chill. They get it sorted out. And then they'll lose in the first round, but that's fine.
There has to be some sort of level of concern. Let's bring in Chris Johnston from NorthStar Bets for Inside the NHL. Chris, if you're Keefe or Dubas, what's your level of concern after that loss?
I don't know if you're in their shoes, you're that concerned. I think in some ways you can try to put a good spin on it, though, when you lose that badly. If you're Sheldon Keefe, I think that there's an opportunity there to get your message through, to be hard on some players, to get everyone's attention, because let's face it, it's only one game. I'm very much with you. I mean, we're at this stage of the season. It's the definition of the dog days of the season. If you're in the Maple Leaf shoes, there really isn't a whole lot pushing them every night. They've come through a tough month where they've been on the road a lot. They've integrated all those new players, blah, 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 blah. We can line the excuses up. It was not a good game. The third period got away from them. But I don't know that there's alarm bells going off in the front office after a game like that. Now, if it becomes a trend, if they go through the rest of this road trip and have some one-sided losses, then it becomes more of an issue. But I think that they've been good enough for long enough to earn the benefit of the doubt for the odd off night.
And let's be honest, fellas, you pull your goal, you have 6 minutes left. You don't really care. You're not that concerned. You're just trying stuff out at that point. Let me ask you though, CJ, I mean, you cover the league, other markets too. I mean, are we just more arrogant here in Toronto, or are we much the same as the major markets in the NHL?
I wouldn't say it's any different specifically than the Canadian markets, other than maybe there's more voices, right? It's a bigger city, Toronto, than Montreal, Vancouver, Edmonton, Winnipeg, Calgary. But I think that the attention on the teams in those markets is just as strong. And they ride the roller coaster. Look at the Jets lately. They have really endured a tough losing stretch. I've seen a lot of panic come through. We've seen that in Vancouver. There's always a certain hysteria around that team from the fans and the reporters. I mean, I think it's part, especially of playing in Canada, compared to a lot of the American markets. And so, no, I don't think really it's any worse. It's just, a little bit bigger, more, bigger media contingent, larger fan base. And so hockey Twitter on a night like Tuesday goes a little nuts when the Leafs are getting beat that soundly.
Chris, is there an understanding for some of these players that it's now or possibly never for them in a Leafs jersey? Are they aware of that?
Absolutely. I think that it's something that almost doesn't need to be said amongst the group. Like, I think that the players that have, formed the core of the team now for 5, 6, 7 years, I mean, those guys understand what's at stake, that they know the history. They know that they haven't been able to deliver in a series now of games where if they won, they would move on to the second round, and they've lost them all in consecutive years here. And so, I do think that the stakes are pretty clear. You also have a number of players on this roster that are coming up on new contracts for the summer. There's not a lot of stability really when you look across the Leafs lineup. It might surprise you to learn that the longest player among the forwards signed is Calle Yarncroke. Everybody else is due to become a free agent or need a new deal, but before his contract is up. And I think it just underlines the fact that there's an ability to pivot here by the front office if they choose to. I don't think they're inclined to do that, but let's see how it plays out here over the next month and then into the playoffs, and see where the group is at after the season.
This core group, I mean, like you mentioned there, they've grown up together. Most of them, JT aside, obviously. Riley's been there the longest. Are they a tight group behind the scenes in that room? I mean, we hear about other teams being this great, cohesion in the room. The Bruins been a prime example of that. It doesn't mean you have to have that, I don't think, to be successful. But would you say this particular group in the core is particularly tight?
I think they are. By all indications, they get along well. they've been through some stuff together, and I think that's where you get that tightness. You forge it in disappointment, frankly, and in being in the battle and having it not go your way and showing up again and getting ready to try to do it again. And so, you also tend to get that sort of level of cohesion if you have some success, and that's the one thing they're missing when it comes to the playoffs. But certainly I don't have any reason to believe that they're not tight, and they're pretty fortunate. I mean, there's been a lot of change in sort of around the margins of this roster. Consistently new players on the third and fourth line, the depth defenseman, the goaltending position. There's been a lot of turnover, but really the core and heart of the team, they've stayed together longer than most teams ever get a chance to, and so they have a kind of a unique situation here. Where they've grown up together quite literally, and they're adults now, they're having kids, they're getting married, all that kind of thing. And so, especially if they find a way to break through and have playoff success, I think that they'll be kind of tied together forever, at least as professionals.
Keefe is obviously going to continue to chop and change some of these lines to figure out what he likes the most and what's best for the playoffs. For Austin Matthews on the top line for the past couple of games, he didn't have Mitch Marner with him. I mean, last night, Keefe put them together, I think, in the third period, and it ended up being a goal. For Austin Matthews, I mean, come playoff time, we'd expect Mitch Marner to be on his line. But do you see him as a guy that can carry a line without one of his best teammates?
I think he can. I mean, if you look consistently from the first day he was in the NHL and scored four goals in that first game, I mean, he's been productive no matter who he played with. In those early days, he was playing with Zach Hyman before Hyman has become the player he has. Connor Brown, obviously he and Mitch Marner have in more recent years played, more together at 5-on-5. But, I think that Austin has been consistently productive no matter who his line mates are. And I think that's really what, part of what this last stretch of the regular season is about, is figuring out what the best look of the top two lines, even the top three lines is. There's a debate about spreading your offensive talent, I think, potentially on three lines. We've seen Nylander at times be kind of on what we'd call the third line. Obviously, Ryan O'Reilly's been out recovering from the surgery he had on his left index finger, but he'll be back at some point and he'll be in that mix. And so I think that's kind of what Sheldon Keefe, in part is trying to determine is just, the best formation of those players, what makes the most sense. And, come playoff time, though, I still think you're going to see a lot of Matthews and Marner together. They've just had such a high level of success, been two of the most productive players in the league. And, they have a familiarity and comfort. And so you can go away from it for a game or two, but ultimately I think when the chips are down, they're going to be playing most of their time together.
And let's be honest, you see this every year in the playoffs. Game one starts and all that line juggling from the previous few weeks goes out the window. It's what's familiar to these players, right? The mental approach is it's going to be Bunting, it's going to be Matthews, it's going to be Marner, maybe Nylander. Who knows about O'Reilly? That's different. But I don't expect to see too many dramatic surprises. Do you, on opening day of the playoffs?
Well, the one question mark for me is what they do with Matthew Knies, who's the organization's top prospect. And we would expect, or I expect, that he'll be turning pro when his NCAA season is over, which could happen as soon as Thursday or Saturday, or might not be until into April, depending on the success University of Minnesota has. But, he's a big player physically, 6'3", works well along the walls, and he's a left winger. And I would say if there's one, sort of area in this forward group where I think that there's some room to maneuver players around, it's at that spot. That he could be a bit of an X factor. I'm not saying he's going to come in and carry them to playoff glory, but where does he fit into the lineup, if anywhere at all? Is he going to be watching in the press box with me, or is he going to get a spot maybe even on one of those top lines? I mean, I think that'll be something to watch. And remember, Sheldon Keefe is not afraid to be bold. Some coaches are a little safer with lineup changes and the like, but if you go back to the playoff years, he moved William Nylander to center, in a do or die game. He played Nick Robertson when he was a teenager who hadn't had any NHL experience in the bubble when they came back from the first Corona stoppage in the NHL, and he had him in playoff games. I think that he could do something that really we haven't seen all year. I think he's sort of a fortune favors the bold kind of coach. And so, yeah, I mean, I'd like to say it's going to be predictable, but I've just been around enough and seen what Sheldon Keefe does in these moments that I think that we should expect a little bit of the unexpected. And maybe that's just Matthew Knies taking a spot on the team when the playoffs start. It's not yet clear that that's going to happen, but I certainly can't rule it out as a possibility.
So the Leafs are 3 points up on the Tampa Bay Lightning. So home ice isn't exactly locked up. Samsonov, his quote unquote road woes continue. Having home ice or playing on the road, do you think that'll determine whether or not Matt Murray or Samsonov starts?
Good question. I would usually sort of lean to no, just because there's a lot of noise in those kind of numbers, but it's been pretty pronounced when you talk about Samsonov in particular, just how dominant, how comfortable he's been, the amount of success he's had at home, obviously a place he's become comfortable playing, and hasn't been able to match that in the games played away from home. I think as well. Let's not discount the fact that I know Matt Murray has not had as strong of a season as Ilya Samsonov, but he certainly has a lot more playoff experience. He's been in tough buildings. He was a goaltender of record on 2 Stanley Cup wins in Pittsburgh, and I think that the Leafs are comfortable with him in theory, assuming he can get his game back to where they'd like it to be, in playing him in difficult spots. And so maybe you see both of these goaltenders in round one. I don't think that would be a surprise. I mean, if you look back at last year's playoffs, almost every team in the league used 2 goaltenders in the first round of the playoffs, and one of them even used 3 because of an injury situation. And so that's kind of more the norm these days. You don't have, Andrei Vasilevsky's a notable outlier. He's going to be playing for Tampa in that first round on the other side when the Leafs play him. But for the most part, teams are kind of cobbling together with a duo. And I don't know that Toronto's any different. And given kind of this pronounced split in Samsonov's performance, maybe we see him get some home games and sit down on the road. That wouldn't really surprise me. I think that at this point, it's still a jump ball for who's going to be starting game one for the Leafs in net.
So Justin Waller is then probably. But joking aside, though, CJ, the front office would love to see Murray work out, right? I mean, they gambled on him. They'd love to see it more than anything. If these guys split the games down the stretch run here, they both play pretty well. Murray stays healthy. The big question, of course, does that though give him the edge over Samsonov? Just that the office did commit a lot to him.
I think so. Certainly if he plays well, and we haven't seen that yet. And to be fair, he's only played a handful of games since returning from his ankle injury. So I do think that there's almost a period of grace for someone who's been out as long as he has. He's missed a bunch of time this year with various ailments. But if we are hypotheticaling this and he does come back and play well down the stretch, I think he probably has the upper hand because of that playoff experience and the comfort level with him. But at least Samsonov has done the best he could do, and he's made it a discussion point. He's made it a decision. He only has one previous win in the Stanley Cup playoffs, so he really doesn't have a resume that looks like Matt Murray's. Matt Murray, in addition to playing 50-odd playoff games in those cups, he's a better than .920 save percentage in the highest pressure, highest leverage moments that someone at his position could face. And so, I would think that the body of work there will give him the edge if he's at a spot where the team's comfortable with him. But right now we're not just there. I mean, he's going to start the game in Florida as the Leafs continue their stretch run here. Samsonov's gone home. His wife's about to give birth to a child, and so maybe Murray gets a few games now while Samsonov's away and gets his confidence back and plays well. And I do think that he does have the edge. But it's going to be a fascinating call. And you're right, they want him to do well for a couple of reasons. I mean, that's what he was brought in for. Really, was this playoff time, but also he's under contract next year, and Ilya Samsonov is not. And so the Leafs are quite invested in his success and need him to be a difference maker for them.
I should say Joseph Wall, not Justin Wall. It's Justin Hull. Joseph Wall.
Little mix.
It's so freaking confusing. But
Wall.
Chris Johnston of NorthStar Bets, thank you so much, man. I appreciate that.
All right, we'll talk soon, guys.